All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're exploring how a young Macedonian king completely captured the known world with a sheer velocity and scale that honestly remains unmatched in human history. We are talking about a figure whose very name basically became synonymous with boundless ambition and pure military genius.
Now, the absolute most crucial point we have to start with here is the number zero. Zero. That represents the total number of battles he lost before his sudden death at age 32. It's an absolute anomaly in military history. By the time he passed away, having literally never tasted defeat, he had conquered a sprawling 5.2 million square kilometer empire that stretched all the way from Greece to northwestern India.
Okay, Section 1, the making of a king. Momentum begins.
So to really understand this unstoppable momentum, we've got to look at his roots back in Pella, Macedon. He was shaped by two vastly different forces during his youth. On one side, you have his father, King Philip II, who provided this really brutal military tutelage. Philip taught him the cold, hard mechanics of strategic warfare. But he also passed down a pretty violent, implosive temper. Then, on the totally opposite side, we have his tutor, the legendary philosopher Aristotle. Aristotle gave him this incredibly rich philosophical education, grounding him in logic, medicine, and art. He also sparked a lifelong passion for Homer's Iliad, a book Alexander literally carried with him on his campaigns. So think of him like a weapon, forged by Philip, but aimed by Aristotle. And you can see that incredible drive so early on. I mean, at just 10 years old, his ambition was already off the charts. He famously tamed this massive horse that was terrified of its own shadow, a horse he named Bucephalus. His father, Philip, was so moved by this display of observation and courage that he told him, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions." And spoiler alert, Bucephalus would go on to carry Alexander all the way into the heart of India.
Moving on to Section 2, conquering the Persian Empire. The unstoppable force.
Now, what is absolutely fascinating about this next phase is just how fast he moved. He turned his father's dream of a pan-Hellenic invasion into a shocking reality right after taking the throne at just 20 years old. In a few short years, he methodically dismantled the massive Achaemenid Empire. Just look at this rapid succession on the timeline. Granicus in Asia Minor in 334 BC, Issos in Syria the very next year, the brutal sieges of Tyre and Gaza in 332, and then the final crushing blow at Gaugamela in 331. He was routing King Darius III's vastly larger forces across a staggering geographical area. Now you're probably wondering, how did he never lose against those massive numbers? Well, it basically came down to sheer tactical genius. The Macedonians utilized the sarissa. Imagine an incredibly long 6-meter pike, and it was wielded by a dense, highly trained central formation known as the phalanx. Meanwhile, the Persians were relying on shorter scimitars and javelins, and they actually stationed their infantry behind their cavalry. Alexander's strategic focus was all built on high mobility and precise cavalry flanking. That allowed his phalanx to just effortlessly push right through traditional Persian lines that were relying entirely on overwhelming numerical superiority. But it wasn't just battlefield tactics. It was his absolute decisiveness in literally everything he did. This famous legend of the Gordian knot perfectly captures his character. So when faced with a complex, supposedly unsolvable knot in the city of Gordium, where legend said whoever untied it would rule Asia, he didn't waste time trying to patiently unravel it. No way. He bypassed diplomacy and convention entirely, proclaimed it didn't matter how the knot was undone, and simply hacked it apart with his sword. When he met obstacles, he met them with immediate, decisive, and sometimes very violent action.
However, to really get the full picture here, we have to impartially examine the flawed protagonist. In 330 BC, the majestic Achaemenid ceremonial capital of Persepolis was consumed by fire after Alexander's troops occupied it. Now, whether this was just a drunken accident, which some sources say, or a very deliberate act of revenge for the Persian burning of Athens over a century prior, the burning of Persepolis undeniably showcased the destructive, chaotic edge to his conquest.
Which brings us to Section 3, to the edge of India, meeting mortal limits.
So, after the fall of Persia, you'd probably think, okay, time to stop and consolidate this massive new empire, right? Nope. His restless ambition pushed him even further east, towards what he genuinely believed were the literal ends of the earth. Through 327 and 326 BC, he marched through the Kofun campaign, the really intense siege of Anornos, the legendary Battle of the Hydaspes, and the Malian campaign. Out in these distant lands, he had to constantly adopt his tactics to face fierce new enemies, totally unfamiliar terrain, and terrifying war elephants. But he ultimately defeated King Porus at the Hydaspes River.
But, as they say, an unstoppable force eventually meets an immovable object. And the crazy thing? It wasn't an enemy army that stopped Alexander. It was his own men. Exhausted, battered by years of constant warfare, and honestly terrified by rumors of even larger Indian armies waiting across the Ganges River, his loyal troops finally mutinied at the Hyphasis River. As his general Coenus pleaded, the men longed to again see their parents, their wives and children, their homeland. It's a deeply human moment, and it finally broke Alexander's forward momentum. Section 4. The Conqueror's Sudden End. The Abrupt Halt.
So, forced to literally turn around, Alexander heads back to Babylon. But those final years, they were definitely not some triumphant victory lap. They were heavily clouded by the devastating loss of his closest friend, Hephaestion, along with his own declining health and increasing paranoia. And then, when struck by a sudden, fatal illness in 323 BC at just 32 years old, he left no clear heir. When asked on his deathbed who should inherit this immense empire, he reportedly whispered, toi kratistoi, meaning to the strongest. It was a chilling final decree that absolutely guaranteed total chaos. And because he lacked any real succession plan, his death instantly triggered 40 years of bloody civil war among his generals known as the Diadochi. His unified political empire permanently fractured into three major power blocks: Ptolemaic Egypt, Seleucid Syria and Persia, and Antigonid Macedonia. So the political unity he fought so incredibly hard for, it dissolved almost instantly.
Finally, Section 5, a legacy of Hellenization, the ripple effect.
Here's the thing, though. While his political empire collapsed almost overnight, his cultural conquests outlasted him by literally centuries. The crucial point you need to take away from this explainer is the concept of Hellenization. This was the spread of Greek language, culture, and population into the former Persian Empire and beyond, seamlessly blending Greek ideals with local customs. And it completely, fundamentally transformed the ancient world.
The sheer scale of this cultural impact is honestly staggering. Just think about this. He founded over 20 new cities, most notably Alexandria in Egypt, which became this historic beacon of learning. Koine Greek became the lingua franca of the known world. I mean, that's the language the New Testament was eventually written in. His march east even inspired the syncretism of Greco-Buddhism in South Asia. You literally start seeing statues of the Buddha wearing Greek-style clothing. Those Greek ideals heavily influenced future empires, including Rome, and he became a legendary, almost mythical figure in European, Islamic, and Persian traditions. His 10-year march created a deeply connected, cosmopolitan world.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a thought to chew on. Did Alexander's true greatness lie in his undefeated military record, or in the lasting cultural fusion he left behind? Was he the Great because of how swiftly he conquered the world, or because of how permanently he changed it? Think about that as you reflect on the sweeping, unstoppable momentum of his short life. Thank you so much for joining me today, and keep learning.